around the end of last year, I posted a thought on IG that I had been wrestling with for some time about how church planners should take a page from the Wu-Tang Clan.
When I read the post, I immediately messaged Charlie and said, yo, I need to unpack this thought because I'm feeling like there's something more here for us to explore.
I felt like what the Wu-Tang Clan had done was create a movement that church planners could learn from. They decided to go against the grain in hip-hop, and church planners needed to go against the grain of how things had always been done. It was bigger than them, and it's way bigger than us.
And I'm just a why not person. I came to Baltimore to do something bigger than just plant a cool church. You know, we're in a new era. We have to think differently and be willing to sacrifice the ways of the past. I'm asking myself regularly, what does it look like for us to chart a new course?
Ultimately, we decided to take a page from the Wu-Tang Clan playbook, and we're gonna push all our individual chips into the middle of the table for the sake of Baltimore. We could do way more together than we could separately, and we want to change the narrative of the church in the city of Baltimore.
So here we are, not concerned about individual brands or ego. I mean, we don't even have a name yet as we've come together, but it's not about the name above the door, but the name above every name. So I think, you know, obviously you start talking about merging and we've been taking these steps. I mean, we got to come up with a game plan. At some point, you got to like decide if you're going to do it, you know, pull the trigger and then like come up with, you know, some steps. And I think for me, there's just how I'm wired and how I process. I gotta do some research. I gotta do some due diligence. And I think, you know, we all needed to do that in terms of having some conversations. And what I appreciate about us, and I think, you know, Reggie, you mentioned this earlier already, was we were able to just come to the table with just some real honest conversations up front. Like leadership, you know, who's leading? What does the structure look like? Money, man, money make everybody nervous, you know. Talking about, you know, the money situation, seats on the bus and all of that. So we, you know, and we'll, you know, obviously unpack a lot of that more with our teams and stuff specifically, but yeah, we had to have some conversations up front. Like, what are we comfortable with? I remember, you know, I had a conversation with Mark Batterson, lead pastor of National Community Church, and he was like, hey, listen, like anything with two heads is a monster, you know? So like, you got to define like the leadership structure specifically and make sure that's not confusing. Yeah, I know, right? But what's critical about that is like, that was just part of the due diligence conversations, you know, that we needed to have. And, you know, Charlie, we talked about, you know, you being a part of the Epiphany churches and, you know, what does that look like? How were you processing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very sensitive but a very necessary conversation, because if you plant like we did, we were affiliated with a number of networks, denominations, tribes, churches, groups, just based on how our funding was situated. And so that's one of those things where I'm like, we just had to go down the list of all those different people that were important in our life as Epiphany Church and go, all right, we got to have these honest conversations. You know something's been brewing. You've seen how we've tried to make things work and we've postured ourselves to be as effective as we can be. But, you know, we feel like we need to go in this particular direction. And those were hard internal situations. Trevor and I had to have some hard conversations internally. Charlie, are you plotting an escape plan? And, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So everybody, we had to go to our wives who had moved to cities and done things with one expectation. So all of that was built in. Like, we had to have a lot of conversations if we really were gonna move from the Chinese food at the table to really, you know what I mean, to merging churches. It was a lot. It's still a lot of conversation.
What Charlie is referencing is in that initial meeting we had Chinese food.
Right.
That's what he's talking about.
Go back to episode 1.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
No, but that's real. I mean, I'm a part of Hope Baltimore is a part of a church planting organization called Orchard. And so I knew what things would be important to Orchard, what things we had to put on the table in terms of like leadership structure and governance and all that sort of stuff. And we were upfront and honest about that, and like what was going to be negotiable and not, if we were going to be able to, realistically do this, And again, like the beauty in this is we were just able to have those conversations, without it being stressful. At least it wasn't that stressful for me. But I think it was a testament to us just trying to put our egos, to the side. And I knew, like, shout out to Jordan Rice for Orchard Group, and Brent Storm, CEO of Orchard, for just hearing my heart, really giving me good counsel, and really not shooting this idea down, but just saying like, hey, like this could be something. Appreciate the work you're doing and the conversations you're having. And that was critical.
Yeah, and the same for us. I had to go to Richmond, talk to Pastor Doug, and Pastor Doug sent us to Baltimore, and we were, and so it was like had to sit down in the shed, his literal office, and just like kind of share my heart and where we're going. But having him say, "Man, I trust you. I know God has called you. And I know God is leading you, and you're going to do what's best for the church and your family and for this movement that we're all a part of." So, but all of that doesn't come without its sense of like nervousness and making those phone calls and what's going to be said and But like you said, just that sense of I'm just appreciative of having those people hear you out and walk alongside you as you're processing a lot of these things.
Yeah, and I just want to say to the people who are like outside of our, sphere, or they're not part of either one of our churches, or they're just kind of watching this and listening to this, and you're maybe a leader or a church planner, like it's just wise to have certain conversations way ahead of time. And that was some of the feedback that I got in terms of the appreciation for, hey, thanks for bringing us along in the process. And you got to discern at what point you need to bring people into the process. But that's part of the due diligence, and that's part of coming up with a solid game plan. Right. is just making sure that you're bringing the right people into the conversation at the right time and giving them freedom and room to speak into it. I just think that's critical.
Yeah. I think the right time is the key word there, just like bringing people in the right time. And I really appreciated everyone's honesty. Like everybody at this table was just honest and real with what was going on with them, what they felt like they needed, what was going on with them and their families, and just moving forward and just being. I don't want to use this, but big boys at the table, right? And that there was trust enough among us that we could just say whatever and not be judged. Yeah. And saying like, yeah, we'll take that to heart. And so.
Well, and I think some of that was, just us saying, hey, we're for the city and we're going to be in a relationship. We're going to work together either way it goes. Yeah. So that's not off the table. Right. It's just like, are we going to be able to like bring these two things together? I think was the only question.
Yeah. And I think one of the words that stuck out to me, even just for like this year, was, and you mentioned a little bit in the last episode, but was intentionality.
Right.
There was a lot of, and it was really transparent. I mean, I was giggling over here. I'm like, boy, y'all doing a lot of name dropping. But I just think that goes even to the testament of like of the transparency piece of how we've operated from early on. Like, where you processing, where you at, what you thinking. When we meeting, we fasting this day, we praying this day, we doing this at this time. So I it's to the point of the people that's listening to that one. It's like there is a level of intentionality, and in the purpose of even bringing people in is a benefit of it, helping guide you, helping coach you, helping process with you. Because sometimes you got some great real dreamers. Yeah, real dreamers have ideas that are not good. But like a
lot of them that's not good. Right.
But it's worth exploring and dealing with and processing through and all that kind of stuff. So, but
yeah, and I think one of the next phases for us in terms of just planning was I told the guys, I was like, hey man, I don't trust any of us, to kind of lead this process on our own. So like, who can we bring in, to help us? And you heard me mention in the previous episode about just the counsel of many. So we brought our friends in, well, they're friends of all of ours now. But they're some good friends Hillary and Jason DeMeo, who run We Are Curio. They're a design thinking firm. Man, they're just amazing. And so we just brought them in to just kind of help us.
This episode is sponsored by
We Are Curio. No, but seriously, if you got some stuff you need to think through, man, y'all hit them up. But no, we invited them to Baltimore to just come hang out with us and literally walk us through a design thinking process, which if you don't even know what that is, you can Google that. Is definitely significant. But yeah, just walk us through. We spent a total of 4 days with them.
4 days.
4 days, yeah. And it was, I mean, yeah, I had to lay down a couple of days because it was a lot.
Got footage of that.
It was a
Literally.
lot. But 2 separate trips to Baltimore to come and like walk us through a process and really just kind of drill down on like, you know, who we are, you know, who we want to be, where we want to go, and how we do this, you know. And so they gave us a bunch of logistics that we needed to walk through, which we walked through with our teams. And you know, we also have a MOU, you know, as well. So we getting our legal and financial ducks in a row. Like, you know, there's a bunch of layers to this.
Deal.
Yeah. This ain't.
And if I can speak to that,
Yeah,
like,
go ahead.
I need for folk to understand that this church thing, church ain't this is a legal institution with checks, balances, 501c3s, paperwork, insurance. There's a lot of legalities.
Right.
That we don't just show up on Sunday with a drum set and a B3.
Right.
There's a lot of things that
Drum
amen.
kit.
Yeah. But no, you know, that's part of the plan. Like, you know, we came together to figure all that stuff out.
Right.
And so we got a big portion of that from the Curio team, helped us with that. You know, Orchard Group, you know, helped us, you know, with some of the other, you know, logistics and stuff we need to put in a row. And then we had to decide, like, okay, how do we disseminate communication to our teams?
Right.
You know, internally first with our leaders, and then set a date to communicate it to our churches. Culture nights, which are opportunities to bring our cultures together, mainly leaders and key stakeholders, so they can speak into how might we live out this, you know, these new mission, vision, and values that we now share collectively.
That's right.
So I'm talking a lot, but I don't know what other feedback or thoughts you guys.
No,
have on that.
this isn't. It can sound like sometimes when you listen to, you know, high level leaders that it's just like it's serendipity, or it's just like they stumbled into this. No, once we did stumble into it initially.
Yeah.
It started with an Instagram post in a lot of ways.
Right.
But over the course of time, we really had to give some parameters and become very clear about how we wanted things to work themselves out. And they had to line up with that, with principles. So for leaders and people that are taking notes on this, it was like, nah, just don't, man, let's just shake. Man, I like you, you like me, let's just go on and do it. Nah, let's really take that time to process and do the things that need to get done so that you have a firm foundation to build on going forward.
Yeah. Well, I just want to throw out the reason for that is, you know, and this was already touched on. Man, we have so many relationships tied to us. You know, these are organizational relationships. These are personal relationships. You know, and that relational equity and trust that we built, like that stuff is delicate. And so like doing due diligence and walking through this in a strategic and intentional way is important because you want to handle that well. And that's what we've tried to do in this process.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to even reference. Like, there's a lot not riding on this in that space, but like, this impacts a lot of people. This impacts our own selves, our own hearts, our families, people we've been walking with, discipling for years, our churches, our leaders, the external relationships, folk that have laid hands on and send out encourage or send checks, or send peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, whatever the case may be. Like it impacts everything and everybody, and that's why I think the due diligence is special, and I appreciate it even through this process because it's like, no rock left unturned. That's kind of what this was.
Well, and I think that's a great point where we can transition where Jesus talks about you got to count the cost.
Yep.
So before a king, before he goes out to war, he counts the cost of what it's going to be to go in on this endeavor. And I think for us, we really had to take a lot of time because all of us
Right.
are paying dividends
Right.
in this endeavor.
Right.
And so yeah, Josh, you know what I mean. What's been some of the stuff that we've had to kind of process? What are some of those costs we're kind of accruing?
Well, I think about it scientifically. You know, I'm glad you brought up the theology aspect of it. But you know, scientifically, when you have two things coming together, you know, there's always going to be gains and losses. You know, that's just the way that it is. But you hope the coming together would be greater.
More
you know,
gains
yeah, more
than
gains
losses.
than losses.
Yeah.
And I mean, the reality of it is, you know, people have signed up to be a part of Epiphany's culture, to be a part of Hope Baltimore's culture. And there's some of those folks that might be skeptical about, like, man, I don't know what this new thing is going to look like. So, hey, some of those people may walk away, you know. And I think some of the stuff that, you know, you have to count the cost on is, man, like if I have a certain affinity towards, you know, preaching a certain number of weeks, you know, like what does that look like? Well, I love this branding, you know, over here, or like, we sacrifice a lot, you know, in this particular, like all of that stuff. You got to just be willing to push to the middle of the table, and we both have had those conversations. Now we've had them at this level, you know. We're gonna have them at the next tier leadership level, and we're gonna have them at the lay level, you know. So everybody's gonna have to deal with that in their own way, but it's our job to walk them through that well.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and to even lean on your scientific thing, like hydrogen and oxygen are combustible. Like you put those two, but on the other side, you get water.
Yeah.
So like, it's like
you preaching now, Trail.
Work through the tension.
Yep.
Like combustion happens, but like we're doing this for the greater good. What comes after all of, because this is tension.
Right.
This is tension. We've all felt tension at some point in time this
Right.
year as it
Right.
pertains to this merger.
Right.
I know I did. I've communicated mine. but like, all right, Lord, like I'm asking for some grace and some favor just through even my own emotions. I'm looking for some grace and emotion. That was mine. Even my own emotions to kind of work through this process. But yeah, hang on.
For sure.
Hang on.